Two lovers locked in a desperate embrace, swearing eternal devotion, blind to the dark fate looming ahead. Ji Yon, tears streaming, collapses into the arms of the man who vowed to make him his own. A blade suddenly punctures his back. His lover, horrified, pulls him close and begs him to wake up. Jae Moon stands at the edge of his execution, facing the divine wrath for the dragon he failed to save. He is condemned to eternal hellfire for his sin, but because Jae Moon brought such prosperity to the realm, the gods offer him a choice. Pick his own curse. He accepts instantly. His only wish? One last look at Ji Yon. The gods agree. With his fate sealed, Jae Moon fades into thin air. Jump to Seoul, 2018. The mall is chaotic, a sea of shoppers rushing through their day. A man is lost in a phone call, oblivious to everything. Ji Yon, desperate to make his interview, slams into the stranger. Jae Moon hangs up, his gaze fixing on the young man who interrupted him. The blonde looks back, sighing an apology. An electric spark flickers between them. They don't say a word, yet it feels like they know each other. Ji Yon breaks the silence with a quick apology, but Jae Moon stares, confused. Then the boy remembers his interview and sprints away. Jae Moon lingers, annoyed he missed the chance to get a number. His phone rings, and he gets back to his call. The curse ensures they won't recognize each other. Outside, a gloomy rain falls. Ji Yon, bundled in a blanket, sleeps soundly past noon. In his dreams, he is standing in a downpour, soaked to the bone. Suddenly, he hears a cry that breaks his heart. He spins around, seeing a dragon's face and hearing a voice calling him mother. Ji Yon wakes up shaking, gasping for air. This rain-drenched dream is constant, and he wonders why nothing ever changes. The dragon's voice lingers, even as the storm rages. Soon, his alarm forces him out of bed, pushing him to brave the relentless downpour. It is a miserable day for a walk. A notification hits his phone. Interview failed. The excuse is weak, but Ji Yon knows the ugly truth. It is because he is an Omega. No matter how smart he is, life for an Omega is a dead end. They survive on expensive, custom-made suppressants. The government acts like they care, but it is all disappointment. His elderly father waves at him from the entrance of a grand building. The old man smiles, holding an umbrella, promising that they will never have to step foot in this place again. Ji Yon freezes, catching up to him, and asks what he means. It turns out the gallery canceled his exhibition. Ji Yon's heart sinks. No exhibition means no money. No money means no pills. Trying to live without them? That is a death sentence. Pushing down his panic, Ji Yon hugs his father tight, putting on a brave face to say everything will be fine. He insists there is no reason to worry, vowing to find the cash, while his father begs him not to overexert himself. Still, his forced smile falters. The fear is real. He eventually lands a job as a waiter just to survive. Working at the restaurant is a daily marathon. In the middle of a shift, his vision blurs and he almost passes out. A customer at the table, Jae Moon, leaps up to catch him just before he hits the floor. The last thing Ji Yon feels is a comforting scent and a face leaning over him. He jolts awake on a couch, confused. A coworker checks on him, saying the manager gave him the rest of the day off. Ji Yon stumbles home, but his head is spinning. The world feels tilted. It is the burnout from those night shifts. Then he catches a familiar, sweet scent and scans the street, suddenly grabbing his face in panic. He starts tearing through his bag for pills. Why is his heat starting so soon? His hands shake as he grabs the bottle, but it slips through his fingers, shattering on the concrete. Passersby start whispering, and he covers his ears, trying to drown out the judgment. Tears spill over. Some omegas nearby offer their own pills, hoping one might work for him. None of them match his type. He refuses them, lying that a friend is already on the way. The others judge him silently, then walk off. The truth? No one is coming. If he goes to the clinic, his secret, the one where he passes as a beta, will be destroyed. He always bought his pills right before his cycle, but this time the money ran out too early. He is out of time. Suddenly, Jae Moon appears, sitting right beside him, asking if he is okay. Ji Yon doesn't speak, just stares. The man reminds him he is the one from the restaurant, reaching out a hand. Jae Moon. Moon offered a ride home, but Ji Yon just stood there, bluntly asking why he couldn't smell him. Turns out he can smell just fine, but those heavy-duty work suppressants mask everything. Caught in a public panic, Ji Yon had no choice but to follow the stranger back to his office. Jae Moon laid him on the couch and tried to bolt. The suppressants were failing, and he knew he had to get out before things got messy. But as he reached for the handle, Ji Yon's desperate plea stopped him cold. After a long night, Jae Moon finally had his assistant take the kid home. Past noon, Ji Yon was dragged back to reality by a persistent phone, barely able to even roll over. He grabbed the phone and pressed it to his ear. Yul Nuna's voice was so piercing he practically launched himself out of bed. She was in a full-blown panic about his condition, bombarding him with questions while he tried to find his brain. Then he spotted the gift bag with his name on it. Memories of last night came flooding back in a rush. Ji Yon was spiraling, totally tuning out Nuna's voice. He finally muttered a goodbye and slid off the bed, burning with shame. How could he have let that happen? Inside the bag, he found the suppressants he desperately needed, along with a box containing something questionable. He shoved it aside, thinking the guy was completely unhinged. He opened his wardrobe to change, but seriously considered crawling back into bed. Meanwhile, Jae Moon was buried in his own drama, wondering if that kid got home in one piece. Honestly, he was just frustrated. He just left the guy, yet he was already craving another look at him. Grabbing his work papers, he tried to bury those thoughts, but the image of that night wouldn't leave his head. The worst part? He didn't even have his number. Just then, a call from Mr. Young Ju cut through the silence. Jae Moon picked up and immediately got an earful of shouting about Master Ji Sung and some missing paintings. The brunette froze, completely blindsided. He promised to fix the mess and hung up, feeling the headache setting in. He'd specifically told his team not to go rogue, but trouble followed anyway. He dialed his manager, Ji Yoon Soon, to demand answers. The manager stumbled through a weak explanation about Ji Sung, but excuses didn't matter. Jae Moon had personally brought this artist on board years ago, and the manager had no right to kick him to the curb. He snapped, threatening to fire the guy on the spot if he acted alone again. He hung up and let out a long, ragged sigh. Work was draining him, and he just wanted to see Ji Yen again. He felt like an idiot for obsessing over the guy's age, but honestly, he had bigger problems right now. Between the massive expansion project and soothing Master Ji Sung, he was swamped. He figured a visit to the old man in 5 days would fix things. As for Ji Yon was sleeping like the dead until he finally heard someone calling his name. He opened his eyes to see Jun Hyung Nim standing there. He started teasing about Ji Yun's sleep habits, but the blonde scrambled to apologize, even promising to double his exercise routine. Jun Hyung silenced him with a hand over his mouth. There was no need for that. He was just there to say he had to head to the palace with his father. Ji Yon immediately wanted in, leaping up to join them, but Jun Hyung just walked away, leaving him hanging. Ji Yon flopped back on the bed, feeling pretty low, wondering when he'd see him again. Plus, what the heck was happening at the palace with Mr. Young-ju? With nothing to do but wait, he watched the rain start pouring. He grabbed some manuscripts and crawled back into bed to read. Suddenly, a weird sound hit the window, not just the rain, something heavier. It kept getting louder, like someone was trying to force their way in. Ji Yon grabbed a blade, holding it behind his back just to be safe, and went to investigate. He shouted out, asking who was there, but the familiar voice that answered made his blood run cold. He shoved the window open and saw Jae Moon standing there, soaked to the bone before practically falling into his arms. Ji Yon started panicking, checking the guy over, but Jae Moon just wanted to get out of the downpour. He stumbled clumsily into the room, dripping wet. He pulled Ji Yon into a desperate hug, looking completely spent. He needed Ji Yon to know everything, and he just wanted to be near him. 3 weeks apart had felt like an eternity. When Jae Moon leaned in to kiss him, Ji Yon suddenly started crying. A terrifying thought flashed through his brain. What about Mr. Young-ju? Everything went fuzzy, and suddenly he saw Mr. Young-ju standing there, weeping. Confused, Ji Yon looked down at his own chest, only to see a blade sticking out of him. Everything went black. I couldn't even process it before I slipped away. Then I jolted awake from that nightmare. I sprang up, gasping for air. What was that? Then suddenly my phone started ringing. My heart dropped. It wasn't my dad, but the hospital, telling me he'd been in an accident. I rushed over, my feet barely touching the ground as I sprinted toward the emergency room registration desk. I was panting, begging the nurse to tell me where he was. Of course, she pointed the way, and I practically flew into the room. I ripped back the curtain, and there he was. Dad, lying in bed, his arm in a cast. I immediately started drilling him for answers, but all he wanted was for me to go home. I was panicked. Could I even leave him here? Thankfully, it was just the arm. Once we got home, I wouldn't let it go, hounding him for the full story. Turns out, he was desperate to get his paintings exhibited. He'd gone everywhere, but every gallery turned him down. Finally, he tried the last one. It was beautiful, filled with art, so he really thought he had a shot. Instead, a staff member made a call, and these thugs just dragged him out. They threw him out, he hit the ground, and woke up in the hospital. I hugged him, ready to lose it. I told him he didn't need to overwork, but I know he only did it to take the pressure off me. He used to have the director's support, but he couldn't stand watching me struggle like this anymore. He was happy I had my own money, but he didn't want me to suffer. I pulled away, blushing, almost ready to tell him about the Alpha I'd been seeing, but I didn't get the chance. The doorbell rang, making me jump. I checked the intercom. Someone from the gallery, asking for Master Ji Sung. I opened the door, expecting anyone but him. We both just froze, dead silent. Jae Moon looked like he'd seen a ghost, realizing I was the master's son. Then Dad peeked out, and he went pale, seeing the director standing right there. We all just stood there, stunned, and I stared between them like a madman. The guy looked away, and honestly, my blood started to boil. I was sure he was the one who fired Dad. I told them both to sit while I made coffee. He'd come to talk, to explain everything, but he kept looking at me with this sad, pitying face, like I didn't know who he was. I whipped up the drinks, went back to the living room, handed Dad his cup, and then I let the whole mug of boiling coffee spill right over Jae Moon's head. Dad jumped up in total shock. I stood there feeling pretty satisfied while he just bowed his head, letting the coffee drip right onto the carpet. Dad grabbed my shirt, screaming at me to apologize right now, but I just ignored him. I wanted that man out of my house. The old man looked so hurt, completely confused by my reaction. I couldn't keep it in anymore. I started unloading on the guy, blaming him for everything, for firing Dad, for ruining his life. Why show up now? It's too late. I kept shouting, demanding an apology, but he just sat there, head hung low, taking it. Then, out of nowhere, he laughed. I was beyond confused. He looked up and said this whole scene was just absurd. He stood up, actually thanked me for the coffee, clearly mocking me. He patted my shoulder, told me he'd see me around, and just walked out. I stood there, totally floored, trying to make sense of what just happened. The second the door slammed, I snapped, throwing insults after him until I burst into tears. I leaned against the door, wiping my eyes, wondering why I couldn't stop. I went back inside and found Dad on his knees, scrubbing the floor. I grabbed the cloth, forcing him to stop, and apologized for losing it like that. He just sighed, understanding, and didn't hold it against me. He patted my back and told me to rest. But as soon as I was alone, I started feeling dizzy, swaying on my feet. I stumbled to my room, something feeling really wrong. I knew I took my meds this morning, but my body was failing me. I collapsed, clutching my stomach, finding that toy the Alpha gave me. I couldn't help myself. I gave in to the heat. Afterward, I just curled up on the bed, hugging the pillow. I hated this life. Meanwhile, Jae Moon got home, looking completely drained. He tossed his clothes in the wash, jumped in the shower to rinse off the coffee, and kept replaying that moment in his head. Honestly, there was only one thing he cared about. Did he hear that name right? Ji Yon? He laughed to himself. I found his spirit impressive, resolute. Honestly, I didn't even mind the defiance. I knew we'd meet again. But first, I had a mess to clean up. Not easy, but I was ready to do whatever it took. Next morning, my secretary dropped the report on my desk. Time to audit curator Ji Yon Sunday. I scanned the pages, questioning every number. When he confirmed the figures, my blood ran cold. The sheer scale of it. 14 months of records, from August 2017 to September 2018. Wages slashed by over 300,000. Embezzlement hitting 75 million. Artists quitting left and right. Total losses? Nearly 5 billion. I leaned back, stunned by the sheer arrogance of it all. He didn't just steal from the staff, he treated their hard work like trash. Losing money? Fine, I can make more. But this? The ruined reputation, the broken dreams of these artists? That's where I draw the line. Time to bring in the lawyers and contact the victims. I told my secretary to clear my schedule. We needed a new curator. He looked exhausted, probably wondering why I was taking this so personally. I had a gap in my day, so I swung by the restaurant where Ji Yon worked. A waitress met me at the door. She asked how many in my party. When she looked up, she blushed another one, smitten. She probably thought I was some celebrity. Cute, but I wasn't there for the fan club. I needed Ji Yon. And of course, he just bolted. Left the building barely 3 minutes before I arrived. I hurried after him, searching the streets. Suddenly, I saw a crowd gathered around a noisy confrontation. A thug was shaking down a young man for money. It was Ji Yon, and the situation was getting ugly fast. The blonde was trying to stay calm, asking for his property back, but the thug was just looking for a fight. He started hurling insults, mocking Ji Yon's condition right in front of everyone. Absolute scum. Then he reached out, trying to help. I was ready to step in, but I realized Ji Yon didn't need saving yet. He was seething. And honestly, I didn't want that creep's dirty hands anywhere near him. The thug was twice his size, but Ji Yon didn't care. Pure adrenaline, he grabbed the guy and flipped him over. The impact shook the ground. The crowd let out a collective breath of relief. Ji Yon stood over him, voice cold. He'd warned him to be polite. The thug just got more enraged. He played his card, revealing Ji Yon as an omega and unleashing his pheromones. Everyone around started gagging. Ji Yon was hit hard. He fell to his knees, shaking. The thug thought he had the upper hand. He stood up, laughing, telling Ji Yon that omegas belong under an alpha. I'd heard enough. He swung to hit him, but I caught his wrist midair. Saved him again. I handed Ji Yon a handkerchief for the smell. The thug tried to bark at me, but one look shut him up. He dropped to his knees, terrified. I released my own pheromones, far heavier, far more suffocating. He realized he'd picked the wrong target. I towered over him. He started stammering out apologies, begging for a way out. I didn't care about his excuses. I laid it out plain. Keep this up, and the law will handle you. Ji Yon's retaliation was self-defense. If the thug wanted to argue, we could take it up with the police. I hoisted the blonde onto my back. I warned that coward to stop bullying the weak and acting like a disgrace to alphas. With that, I carried him to my car. I buckled him into the front seat, safe and sound, and tucked my jacket around him. He stirred when I called his name. He looked up, and for a second, I saw pure wonder in his eyes. Then reality hit. He recognized me. The director, the guy who fired his father. His eyes turned icy. He pulled away, completely guarded. I didn't blame him, but I wasn't going to let him go that easily. I told him the truth. I'm someone who gets bored in a week, but he's different. I couldn't stop thinking about him. So I made him an offer, a deal. He looked so confused, probably thinking I was hitting on him. Honestly, that was the least of it. I told him I wanted him to work for me. He asked what kind of work. Curatorship and a bed partner. No overtime, of course. Plus, he already had experience with me. He stared, lost. I leaned in and reminded him he was the one who embraced me that day. The blonde clutched his head, begging for a breather as Jae Moon laid out the brutal truth. Ji Yon shot him a glare. The brunette, undeterred, pushed aside the drama to get his answer. How could he even suggest this after hurting his father? Ji Yon didn't hold back, calling him out. He flatly refused to work with him. Seeing his opening closing, the brunette changed tactics. If he joined him, he'd cover the master's medical bills and support Ji Yon's lifestyle completely. But there was a catch he had to stop pulling away. The man leaned in, cupping Ji Yon's face. He went in for a kiss, pheromones flooding the air to force compliance, but it backfired. A sharp slap rang out. The blonde scrambled back, shaking, terrified by his own outburst. Tension thick, they retreated to the office, where Jae Moon pushed the contract across the desk. Ji Yon balked at the unfair terms, but the brunette countered 2 years or a lifetime with him? The man had a point. The blonde sighed, his gaze dropping to the paperwork with weary eyes. The deal was all upside for him, while Jae Moon got nothing. As he handed it over, Ji Yon asked why he didn't dodge the slap. The man admitted his pheromone play was a rookie mistake. Still, 1 slap for his company? Jae Moon was more than satisfied, watching him beam. The blonde mused that despite everything, the guy was a stunner. His looks and vibe were exactly his type. Jae Moon swiped the papers away, changing the subject. Did Ji Yon know pheromones could smell like perfume? He had overdone it before, but this time, he promised it would be subtle. He told the blonde not to sweat it. Until the contract was signed, he'd keep his hands off. Ji Yon panicked. He tried to lock his feelings away, hating how much he craved that touch. The brunette noticed the blonde trembling and reached out. Tears welled in Ji Yon's eyes, years of loneliness finally surfacing. When Ji Yon didn't answer, the man called out again, then softened his tone, apologizing for the rush. He told him the offer was always open. Just bring the signed contract to his office. He left his card and walked out. Finally, a name. A week later, Ji Yon was at the gallery, wandering the halls like a lost puppy. Exhausted, he sagged against the wall. A passerby spotted him, asking his name, and Ji Yon looked up, barely managing a response. It was the secretary, Kang Jun-suk. Ji Yon admitted he was hopelessly lost. The man guided him deeper in. Through a window, Ji Yon caught a glimpse of a hidden waterfall. Of course, the guy owned something this extravagant. As they reached the director's door, nerves spiked. No turning back now. Inside, the secretary reported that the long-awaited recruit had gotten lost in the maze. Jae Moon offered a curt thanks for the assist. He brushed off the confusion, blaming the ongoing renovations for the identical-looking corridors. While the director talked business, Ji Yon couldn't help but stare. The man was devastatingly competent. Jae Moon caught him staring, and, to his own surprise, assumed Ji Yon was ready to sign. He let out a low chuckle, missing the blonde's growing discomfort. Unable to handle the intense gaze, Ji Yon finally asked what his deal was. The man just shook his head, then tasked the secretary with onboarding the new hire. He dismissed Ji Yon, who predictably bolted out the door. Once alone, the secretary dropped the act, reporting that the stolen funds were gone, laundered into another gallery. He asked if he should keep tailing the traitor, but Jae Moon waved it off, opting to let the courts handle it. Then he reminded him, "Take care of Mr. Ji Yon, as agreed." Alone on the office couch, Ji Yon pored over the artist list, trying to memorize every single name. The guy had made it clear in this gallery. Knowing the artist was just as important as the bottom line. He kept preaching about trust and money. It was overwhelming, but Ji Yon felt the pressure to prove himself. He pushed through the exhaustion, determined to learn it all, no matter the cost. Time slipped away, and the blonde blinked his eyes open to a pitch-black office. He'd crashed for hours. He grabbed his throbbing head, winced at the pain, and was jolted by a sudden question. I blinked awake. There he was, Jae Moon, sitting right there. Lucky for me, he'd only been in the office 5 minutes. Shift was finally over. I didn't give Ji Yon a chance to say no. I just told him we were grabbing dinner together. Tried to sweeten the deal with overtime, and yeah, he wasn't exactly thrilled. But hey, he agreed to dinner.